Today we'll be learning about impact stains and how the force that's applied to the blood can affect what the blood spatter looks like, as well as a little review on packaging blood evidence. So let's get to it. Okay, I'm going to apologize to you guys right now. I redid this PowerPoint after I made your notes, so stuff is not going to be in order. So you'll have to kind of search for it as I am doing this video, so I'm sorry. We classify blood stains into three main categories: passive stains, transfer stains, and projected or impact stains. We also classify blood stain patterns according to the amount of force applied to the blood source, and they are classified as low force, medium force, and high force patterns. Passive stains are technically considered low force stains because the only force acting on the blood is gravity. Passive stains include drops or drips, flows, and pools. A drip stain is a blood stain resulting from a falling drop that formed due to gravity. This could occur from blood dripping from an injury or from a weapon that has blood on it. A drip trail pattern is a series of drops that are separate from other patterns, and these are formed by blood dripping off of an object or an injury. The stains will form kind of a line or a path, usually made by the suspect after injuring or killing the victim or injuring themselves. This pattern may show direction and speed of movement, lead to a discarded weapon, or provide identification of the suspect by his or her own blood. A drip pattern is a blood stain pattern resulting from blood dripping into blood. Spines refer to the jagged pointed projections that form on the edge of a blood droplet when it hits a surface, while satellites are tiny separate droplets of blood that are ejected from the main droplet upon impact, essentially forming small mini spatters around the parent stain. When a blood droplet strikes a surface, the spines radiate out from the parent drop and can tell what direction the blood is traveling. On this droplet, you can see these are the spines that are sticking out from it. And then all these other little droplets here are the satellite droplets that are ejected from the parent stain. Here's some more drip patterns. You can see the spines, you can see the satellites. Flow patterns are made by drops or large amounts of blood flowing by the pull of gravity. The flow direction may show movement of objects or bodies while the flow was still in progress or after the blood dried. Interruption of a flow pattern may indicate the sequence and passage of time between the flow and its interruption. When a bleeding victim remains stationary for a period of time over a surface that is leveled and undisturbed, the accumulated blood is what is known as a pool pattern. It is one of the most common types of blood stains found on crime scenes that allows crime scene investigators to gauge how much blood was lost and to determine the time of the crime. It also indicates the position of the victim that allows such a pool to form and provides evidentiary value as a wet sample. It is often associated with extensive bleeding brought about by a shooting or a stabbing. Blood spatter is categorized as impact spatter, which is created when a force is applied to a liquid blood source, or projection spatter, which is caused by arterial spurting, expirated spray, or spatter cast off an object. The characteristics of blood spatter depend on the speed at which the blood leaves the body and the type of force applied to the blood source. Medium force spatter typically results in droplets between 1 and 4 millimeters in diameter. It is commonly produced by blunt force trauma, such as from a bat or an intense beating, or by stabbing. Compared to low force spatter, medium force spatter droplets are more spread out, but still are clearly visible. The spatter is typically elliptical in shape. It's smaller than low force spatter, typically will have tails and directionality. Impact spatter occurs when an object impacts a source of blood. It refers to a bloodstain pattern created by a moderate impact force, typically a blunt object like a baseball bat or a forceful punch, and again causes blood droplets with a diameter usually between 1 and 4 millimeters. A cast-off pattern is created when a blood-covered object flings blood in an arc onto a nearby surface. This kind of pattern is commonly produced by a bloody fist or a weapon between delivering blows, and the spatter is in a linear pattern. The features of the cast-off pattern are affected by the size of the object, the amount of blood, and the direction the object was moving. By counting and pairing forward and backward patterns, you can determine the minimum number of blows that were delivered. Here's an example of cast-off spatter. High force spatter is where the force is greater than 100 feet per second, which would be something you would associate with a high-speed collision. Usually this is associated with gunshots. The spatter is much smaller in size and can be varying in shades of color. Other high-force spatter would include projected spatter, expirated spatter, and then voids are part of that, which we'll talk about in a second. Gunshot spatter is fine forward spatter from an exit wound and back spatter from an entrance wound. Forward spatter basically is blood droplets that are projected away from the impact, and back spatter is blood droplets that are projected toward the impact. So if the impact is here, this is your back spatter, this is your forward spatter. A gunshot will only produce back spatter if the bullet doesn't exit the body, which makes sense. If we don't have this bullet exiting here, we won't have forward spatter, we'll only have back spatter. Depending on the distance from the victim that the gun was discharged, some back spatter may strike the gunman and enter the gun muzzle. This is called the drawback effect, and that's what you're seeing in this picture right here. A projected pattern is caused by an injury to the heart or a main artery and the pressure of the continuing pumping of the heart. The site of the initial injury to the artery can be found where the pattern begins with the biggest spurt. The trail away from this point shows the victim's movement. In this picture, the initial injury is over here, and because the heart is pumping and you have higher blood pressure when it first comes out, you'll see the blood projected onto the surface at a higher level, and then with each pump of blood it gets lower and lower and lower because the blood pressure gets lower as you lose blood. An expirated blood pattern is created by blood that's expelled from the mouth or nose from an internal injury. The presence of bubbles of air in the drying drops or a lighter color as a result of dilution by saliva can differentiate a pattern created by expirated blood. The presence of expirated blood gives an important clue as to the injuries suffered and the events that took place at the crime scene. A void pattern is created when an object blocks the deposition of blood spatter onto a target surface or object, and the spatter is deposited onto the object or the person that's in the way instead. The blank space on the surface or object may give a clue as to the size and shape of the missing object or person. Voids may be applicable for establishing the body position of the victim or assailant at the time of the incident. A contact or transfer pattern is created when an object with blood on it touches one that does not have blood on it. A swipe is a blood pattern resulting from a lateral transfer from a moving source onto another surface. This is basically a bloody object moving along a clean surface. One side is usually feathered. See this feathering of this side, which indicates our direction of travel. We're starting here and we're moving this way. An example of a swipe would be a victim being dragged across the floor by a perpetrator and bloody hair swipes onto the floor. That's what is showing in this picture on the left. So commonly this is going to be caused by hair swipe or a clothing swipe. Now to confuse everything, there's also a wipe. This is created when an object moves through blood that has not completely dried and moves, removes, or otherwise alters it. So this is a clean object moving along a bloody surface. So just remember, a swipe is a bloody object moving along a clean surface. A wipe is a clean object moving along a bloody surface. All right, we'll do a little bit of review on blood stain collection. Here's a list of things you should always do. At a minimum, you want to wear protective gloves. Change gloves between every sample. Masks and eye protection are recommended. You want to use disposable tools that are sterile or cleanable sterilized tools. And dry your swabs before packaging in separate paper containers. And then you always want to be careful about cross-contaminating or any biological hazards. That's why you want to make sure you're wearing protective gear so you aren't exposed to anything that might be in the blood. And then considering just preservation of evidence. When you're swabbing the blood, you want to do that from a more heavily blood-stained area. We're doing this to determine, hopefully, whose blood it is. You want to collect it after you've documented the stains. You must use sterile swabs, and you need to collect enough for serology testing and DNA testing. Before any bloodstain or bloodstain item is collected, you need to ensure that it has been thoroughly documented. You want to allow the items to air dry at the scene if possible before packaging. If you have clothing, you want to put some cardboard or some butcher paper on the inside of the clothing before you fold it up to keep the blood stain from transferring to a different place on the clothing. And then roll it up or place it in a box if appropriate, but definitely it needs to be in breathable paper-like material.